Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Keep the Heroes Out from Brew Games. Keep the Heroes Out is a 1-4 player cooperative dungeon crawling game in which you are actually the monsters trying to keep the heroes out. I should note, the game does say it can be played with 5 and 6 as well, although it recommends not really doing so because of potential downtime. I have thoughts and opinions even on 3-4 player, but we'll get to those later. But this is, like I said already, is a dungeon crawling game. The general idea is you are playing as the monsters. You're going to choose a faction as your player. You're going to choose, are you the ghost, are the skeletons, are you the dragon, are you Cthulhu if you have the little Cthulhu expansion. And then you're going to be trying to make sure that your dungeon is as dangerous as possible to all the players who are trying to infiltrate that dungeon. This is your dungeon. This is actually a fake scenario. It's not actually real. It's just for the setup over here. But you are trying to keep your dungeon safe. You're trying to make sure other enemies, the heroes, are trying to get in, and specifically, they are trying to loot this 4 treasure chests. If they do so, well then you lose the game. On the other hand, if you manage to keep it safe, and you manage to survive through 2 waves of invading heroes, well then you'll win the game. That's the general idea of what's going on here. The actual gameplay goes through a cycle of hero turn, enemy turn, hero turn, enemy turn, with the difficulty being scaled around what you're particularly trying to go for. But the hero turn consists of you are going to have your hand of 5 cards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you're going to play the cards for a variety of actions on them, generally involving things like moving, killing, and activating are going to be the primary thing you're doing, although there's a bunch of other things going on. And to that end, we'll have, let's say, a hand of cards over here. Over here we have this card for the skeletons, which has, if you kill, you can then spawn someone. So the skeletons have an opportunity to kill someone, but they also need to be able to get there. And right now, the skeleton's over here, and he's trying to get to one of these spots to kill one of the heroes. To that end, well, he does have a movement card here you can use, so you can go ahead and expend this movement card, which gives him a move and activate. So he's going to go ahead and move. So he's going to move over here to this adjacent zone. He's then going to activate in this adjacent zone, at which point he can either activate his own ability, his clan ability, to put a bone down, or he can trade a bone, that's this location over here, lets him trade a bone, which there is there in that zone, in order to get one of the pet cards from the dungeon deck over here, from the deck building aspect of the game. So he's going to go ahead and do that. He's going to move, like I said already, then activate. He'll get rid of the bone, tossing it back to the pool in the middle, and he'll grab one of these cards. He'll take this one, which gives him a bit of potential defense, and he'll put it into his discard pile, and a new card will come out. There's a bit of deck building going on in this game past your starting hand of 10 cards. But he now actually wants to go ahead and go through the process of killing things, so he'll go ahead and he'll kill and spawn. So he's going to play that card, which will let him kill this enemy over here, and spawn a skeleton in that zone as well. That's going to allow part of the actions over there. From there, we have a few more options over here. This particular card, unfortunately, allows for a kill, but there's no more skeletons anywhere where there's an enemy, so that won't help them right now. Although there are ways sometimes to draw more cards, although we won't focus on that for the sake of this coverage over here for the review. Over here, on the other hand, he has the opportunities to spend 2 more skeletons and or do more deck building. If he had some skeletons in play, he could, for instance, spend this activation. This is an either or. He could spend this activation to put a bone in play, and then this activation to trade that bone for another one of these cards, adding more to his deck. In this case, though, we're going to spawn more skeletons on the board to give us some defense into that particular type of room, and to this particular type of room again, spending those 2 cards. At this point, though, we now have a skeleton in this room, so we can use our last card to go ahead and kill this guy. That's actually us. We can't kill us. Never mind. We should not kill our allies over here. And that's going to be a wasted card. We'll hold on to that for next turn. That's the basic idea of the game. You're taking actions to attack. You're taking actions to do ranged attack to adjacent zones. You're taking actions to potentially defend over here. Let's see if we can show you a defend card. I just grabbed one over here. This symbol over here is going to be a defend. You can go ahead and use this card in defense and draw another card, or you can use this card to attack and draw another card. This option over here lets you either place a portal down the board, which will help you move around from portal to portal, or take 3 ranged attacks. So you can have different symbols going on as far as what you're doing. They mostly come down to forms of drawing, defense, attacking, movement, and activation are going to be your hand economy for the game. When you're done all of that, when your skeletons are on the board, when you've done your thing, you've taken your turn, you're going to go ahead and proceed with a dungeon turn. You're going to draw back up to 5 cards, refill to 5, any cards left over will be there, but then you'll take a dungeon turn where you'll go through, depending on the difficulty level, you'll draw anywhere between 1 and 3 enemy cards and resolve them. You're going to go to this enemy deck over here. We're currently playing on difficulty level 2, which has you drawing 2 cards in phase 2 and in phase 1, and we're going to go ahead and draw 2 cards. We first are going to put down 2 rogues in this particular room type, so they're going to go over here, and well, we don't actually have the other one on the board, because like I said already, this is a fake map, so we'll just toss it over here for the sake of the example. 2 different rooms. They would go ahead and destroy traps. Each of the 4 enemy types, each of the 4 hero types, have a special ability that they do. So normally a trap would be something that if you popped an enemy down to a zone with a trap, that enemy would die along with the trap. In the case of the rogues over here, they get rid of the traps, so those won't help you over there. And then the enemies go through a sequence of activation. This is where the enemies kind of rely on this idea of slowly invading the dungeon, doing bad things, but they constantly reactivate enemies, so it has a large snowball effect. If you can keep the enemies in check, you're kind of okay. As soon as you can't, you will find the enemies start to snowball very quickly. You see, the enemies go through a bit of a sequence of trying to do different things. The first thing they're going to try to do is they're going to try to open any chests if there are any chests in their zone. So if there is a chest in the enemy zone, right now we have a chest over here, here, and here, the enemies will try to open them, although you have to have enemies equal to the number on the chest. If they don't have those, then they'll sit there and wait patiently. This enemy over here is here because he waited patiently for the chest, and he's waiting for other enemies to come his way and help him activate it. On the other hand, enemies will also have to deal with, well, you. So this enemy over here, because there's no chest, he's going to start moving, he's going to rush into this room, at which point there are enemies, you're the monsters over here, and he's going to go ahead and kill one of you and exhaust himself. When he kills you, you'll get your person back, he'll be exhausted, and he will activate again, or she, I guess in this case, she will activate again the next time another enemy enters that zone, which we'll show you how that works in a second. On the other hand, enemies that are not yet exhausted will continue to do things trying to potentially kill you, trying to get to chests, or alternatively waiting for other heroes if they are by the chest. This enemy over here is going to exhaust to deal 1 damage to you, and this particular character, the wizards over here, have 2 health as indicated on the card, so he's going to be still fine but with 1 damage. And enemies are eventually slowly moving towards this chest over here, towards this floor. This particular room they don't really spawn in, but they're slowly heading here, trying to get this chest. Once there are 4 over here, they will immediately go ahead and activate, and you'll lose the game. Other chests, on the other hand, will give them temporary abilities. For example, this one refreshes all the heroes used to open that chest, which could be really problematic in terms of that snowballing as they slowly close in on your eventual 4 chests. Let's go ahead and do another card over here and see what we can draw. We draw 2 mages who are going to go into the war rooms. That's going to be this room over here and this room over here. Because he handed over here, he's going to immediately activate that ally over there. Whenever an enemy either charges into a room or spawns into a room, they're going to activate all heroes, refreshing them, at which point they'll all activate. So right now, these 2 are enough to open this chest, and they're going to go ahead and free anyone in the dungeon over there. And this is where you start running into that effect over there, where enemies are going to start being more dangerous. So they have activated the chest, they're exhausted, but unless we deal with them before they're activated again, they will continue to get more and more dangerous. This enemy over here activated, popping this guy up. Because there's a hero in the zone, one of them will go ahead and kill the hero and exhaust, and the other one will start moving towards the chest, at which point he'll wait patiently for more heroes to come his way. That's going to be the basic hero activation phase. Again, heroes being the bad guys in this game. So you're going to take a turn, you're going to play 5 cards, you're going to do all these things for moving, attacking, trying to destroy, trying to hold them back, spawning traps, generating resources, using those resources to draw into more deck building. Then the enemies will take a turn drawing between 1 to 3 cards, depending on the difficulty level, until they eventually do all this invasion of the dungeon, and then you'll repeat the cycle until eventually they get to that 4 chest, or you survive the invading hordes of enemies, and that is basically how you play Keep the Heroes Out. A few other small things we didn't really talk about. There's some special rooms, there's some things to get into there, but that is basically what's going on in the game. And to that end, and each of the heroes has a special ability, we only briefly talked about one of them, but let's go ahead and dive into the review, starting off with ease of play. The rulebook for the most part is, I want to say, pretty simple to follow as far as how the game actually plays. There were a few things that I felt weren't really clear that took me learning the game, setting it up, starting to play, and then realizing all these things that weren't 100% clear, or things that I had to make certain assumptions on to a degree. But for the most part, I was able to get through it. It wasn't that difficult. It was easy with questions, I'd say. Easy to understand, easy to learn, and then a little bit of questions as far as the sequencing of how things play out. It's also not the most intuitive, the way the heroes are kind of, exhausting and then just stopping and then popping back up again. So it's not, I think the aspect of the gameplay not being super intuitive made it a little bit more complicated to learn, but it was not the hardest game to learn, not by a long shot. Game time comes in, well, it varies. Depends on the player count a lot, but you're looking at, depending on the scenario, depending on the player count, anywhere on the half an hour for a quick solo game, all the way up to an hour and a half plus if you're playing it at a full player complement, especially at some of the larger scenarios. I have not played through all the scenarios, so I can't comment on the later ones as far as whether they get particularly longer. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with just the general art and charm of this game. This art over here, the meeples over here, it's worth noting, by the way, these enemy meeples are an expansion. Otherwise, they are little tokens you'd have on the board that you flip up and down. But the general art, aesthetics, the charm of the game is completely off the charts. Even just the theme of it of, keeping the heroes out. You are monsters, you're Cthulhu, you're a dragon, you're a bunch of skeletons, and all good things, and the art and charm is tremendous. There's also a decent amount of variety in the game, from the fact that you're going to be playing as various heroes, you're going to be playing against 20 different scenarios, playing as various monsters, playing against 20 different scenarios. The room configuration will be a big deal, how everything plays out. There's a decent amount of variety to the experience that you're going to go through. The same core is always there, but each monster has their own dungeon deck, which already means there's variety baked in, and then of course if you have the expansion, you'll get the little Cthulhu monster as well, with additional item cards as well. There's also an expansion to make it a one versus many scenario where one person plays as the heroes against all the monsters. I have not played as that, so I can't talk about that. But overall, you know, the variety in this scenario, combined with the charms, all good things there. And there's a lot to think about as you play through it. There are a lot of options on the table, especially as the dungeon becomes overwhelmed. When you first start diving into it and the dungeon's a little empty and or things are in control, there's not as much options. You're going to play through your cards. There'll be mostly obvious choices as you try to build up. But as soon as those heroes are there, there is a lot of agency in terms of what you do and how you do it. How quickly you want to clear the dungeon of heroes, which I highly recommend because it snowballs pretty quickly if you have any heroes in play, because as they move, as they spawn, they activate existing heroes, which means killing those heroes are a big deal. But which heroes you take out, what you do you prioritize on deck building a bit so you can be a little bit more prepared if you're drawing 3 cards per wave on that harder difficulty mode in wave 2. So lots of options to think about on the cards you have, on the choices you're making. For a very simple game, there's a decent amount of agency in there. There's also difficulty scaling as well, which is nice. The game comes in with the easiest family mode where you're drawing 1 card in wave 1, 2 cards in wave 2. Then there's already a pretty decent balanced mode of 2 cards in wave 1, 2 cards in wave 2. That's already pretty decently balanced. And wave 3 is going to be, difficulty scaling 3 is 2 in wave 1 and 3 in wave 2, and that you need to be on your toes the entire time. You can absolutely win on that, but you do need to be on your toes, and this very quickly moves away from being any sort of family game at all when you're playing on that difficulty mode. As far as what I don't like in the game, unfortunately there are a bunch of things here. First of all, I mentioned the difficulty scaling, but what I didn't talk about is the fact that this game does feel fairly random in the terms of the way the game can play out. Because of the nature of the heroes on the board, and because of the way they all cascade into multiple activations for them, you can play through games where you can take those risks and whatnot and try to figure out how it goes, and you'll have the hero spawning, and you'll have a single hero spawn here, a single hero spawn there, no problem at all. Or you'll have heroes spawning exactly where necessary to be able to further activate those other heroes. I have had turns in this game, especially when you combine it with that chest over here that lets you refresh all your actions. I have had turns in this game where I went from everything being in control to drawing 2 cards and having the entire dungeon completely overwhelmed. That does happen in this just because of the random nature of how badly things can scale, because you're not always drawing and activating 2 heroes a turn or whatnot. You're drawing and activating 2 cards, but how damaging those cards can be very much depends on how your dungeon currently is set up, and it could be not a big deal at all, or it could be the end of the game, and so that random output does have a wide swing in the game. It can also be too easy, and this is almost the reverse of that. The game kind of balances between being too easy to control versus completely snowballing. It has that aspect in the game. If you are being on top of your game and you're keeping the heroes down, if you're doing everything you can to squash the heroes every single turn, to make sure there are as few heroes remaining on the board before the next monster's turn, things can feel pretty much in control, and then the game can feel a little bit drawn out as you just draw cards and feel in control the whole time. And then the flip side of it is, like I said already, especially if you're not killing the heroes, but even if you are, you have that complete snowballing that can occur in the game, which is worth being mindful of. I'll also say that if you don't have these tokens over here, if you don't have these, I don't think the regular tokens for the heroes do the game justice. You have your chunky monsters, you have your, all your tokens and resources, you have these dungeon tiles, and you have these little tokens that are just going to be flipped up and down with the color of the token, and it can be very easy and very quick to lose sight of the heroes in the dungeon. I find having these upgraded bits is significantly enhanced my gameplay experience. The first time I played with this, I just played with the regular tokens, and then second game onwards, I was already using these, and I found these to be much, much better, to the point of the original ones being bad. In a game that has this many pieces on the board, not seeing where the heroes are at a glance, especially with the way the game snowballs, can absolutely be a big problem. And my last complaint is the fact that the deck building in the game, which to me is one of the funner elements of the experience, of the variety of the experience, of starting with your deck, of what you're good at, of how you're going to generate portals, or just to completely destroy the enemies, having your specific deck and your specific advantage, and then having the deck building elements of the game where you gather cards into your deck. That to me is one of the more compelling aspects of the game, which is why it was a little frustrating that I found in general that specific aspect of the game wasn't as focused on. And what I mean by that is, I found the game kind of comes with one of 2 options. Either you're playing with a high degree of deck building, and you are likely to be more overrun very quickly, Or alternatively, you ignore the deck building and you keep the monsters down, and then you're able to stay in control, but you experience one of the less fun elements of the game. The only way I found that you're able to kind of do both is if you're playing on a lower difficulty level, which means to me it kind of felt like the game had to be played inefficiently to truly explore the deck building in a fun way, and on harder difficulty levels, you were spending every single moment you possibly could to kill the heroes to keep them down, and you didn't explore deck building nearly as much. There were many games where I played, maybe 2 or 3 cards into a deck and mostly had my 10 starter cards. As far as I can see others not liking, first of all, this game can definitely seem more lighter and family friendly than it is. Yes, as far as difficulty scaling goes, there is an easier difficulty mode, which I think is a cakewalk. That easiest difficulty mode is a cakewalk, to my opinion. Once you go to difficulty 2, it's already a challenge, and at 3, you gotta be on your game. But the difficulty does not necessarily have to do with how easy or hard it is to understand this, and I did find this to be a little less intuitive. I guess speaking frankly, I've had an easier time teaching my kids how to play Zombicide than teaching them how to run Keep the Heroes Out. I think it's just a question of intuitiveness. This game, I think, presents as family-friendly, and I do not think it's the most complicated game, but I also don't think it's the most intuitive, and I had a harder time having younger kids engage with the experience, difficulty aside, just understanding the experience. And then secondly, I would say that there are multiple issues, in my opinion, at higher player counts. That's not as much a problem for me, because I don't mind playing it at 1 and 2, in fact, I prefer it, but playing it at 3 and 4, you're going to run into a few issues from balance in the game in general. The way the game is set up, I don't think it's equally balanced at different player counts, and the way different things will happen on different turns. So between the deck building as well, you're going to experience less deck building as well. However little you're experiencing in the game in general, you'll see even less of that in 3 and 4 players. You will see more balance issues as the game gets a little harder because things are happening to everyone's turn, and you have less opportunity to potentially react to it. There's also going to be more downtime in the game. I think 3 and 4 player counts are really less ideal, and 1 and 2 is really where the game shines, and at 1 I prefer playing with 2 factions, but you can do what you want over there. As far as final thoughts on Keep the Heroes Out, if it's not already clear, there are many things I like about this game and many things I don't like about this game. I very much enjoy the overall experience. I think the overall experience is good. I think it really needs a second edition kind of thing going on here. There's a lot that I like here. There's a lot that I enjoy. I think this is charming beyond belief. I think it has a lot of variety in terms of the scenarios, in terms of the factions. I think there's a lot of positive things I can say about the game. There's also a bunch of things that hold it back for me. A bunch of issues from anywhere from, the deck building, want to see more of that. From feeling the game needs to be almost a little bit more balanced as opposed to a little bit more random in terms of how things are happening in the game. From the fact that the game, and this one I don't know if it's easy to address, but the game to me isn't as intuitive as I would like. It kind of works, that idea of the hero spawning and rushing into a zone, but it's not as intuitive, and also leads to that potential swinginess of the experience. Overall, for me, this is a 3.5 out of 5. I do enjoy it. I do like it. I want to like it more than I do. The level of charm here is off the charts. But at the end of the day, there are a few too many issues holding it back, and so for me, it's one that I do enjoy, but have a bit too many complaints. It's a 3.5 out of 5 for me. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, if you're looking for a similar random-ish fest of just trying to deal with a whole bunch of hordes of things, a Zombicide. Anything in the Zombicide series very much does have that, and I think it's a bit more intuitive and a bit more, I'll just go with intuitive. It's a bit more intuitive as far as the gameplay experience. I have my particular favorite Zombicides, which for me right now is going to be Black Plague and Undead or Alive. And then if you're looking for something else that has an absolute ton of charm and cutesy little wooden meeples and gives you a very heavy experience behind that, well, Root is going to be one that gives you a incredible area control game with a lot of cute little pieces and a very, very tight experience behind it. In any case, and until next time, hope you found this video helpful. I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and I hope you have a good one.